Story 1. This happened to me in 1997. For me, that year was awesome. Quick backstory: in 1995, I lost my dad to cancer. After that happened, hubby and I decided to start a family. So in January of 1997, my little man was born. Also, I was active duty in the military at the time. Not getting political here, just giving information for what was happening in the military at the time. Government decided to downsize the military, so recruiting slowed. Incentives were given to people who were close to retirement to take early retirement. Same as with people who had re-enlistment coming in the next year. I fall into the last category. So hubby, active duty as well, talked it over, and we decided that it was too much for both of us to be active duty. So since he outranked me and had more time in service, yep, you guessed it, I got out. So as I said, my baby was born in January 1997. My pregnancy was normal, except at 23 weeks, I measured 26 weeks. The doctor sent me to have an ultrasound immediately. They thought I could be having twins, even though they could not hear 2 heartbeats. Not totally unheard of. Please correct me if I'm wrong about the heartbeat, as in no way, shape, or form do I have any form of medical training. So I did an ultrasound and nope, just one really healthy baby boy. We start getting closer to my baby's day. The doctor decided that I could not have a normal delivery because of his size. So C-section, here I come. Hubby and I decided we wanted a minimum of 2 kids, and with any form of luck try and time them to be around 18-24 months apart. After our baby was born, the doctors told us to be extra cautious so that I don't get pregnant again right away. As this was 24 years ago, I don't remember the exact details, only that I would have a really high-risk pregnancy if I did. And we found out in June of 1997 my pumpkin was on her way. Now, how does the downsizing come into play? We decided to put the paperwork in for me to get a 6-month early out, meaning I only have to complete 3.5 years instead of 4 years, and it counts the same as if I did the 4 years. No more, no less. Paperwork approved, discharge date fall 1997. I was still going to work, but because of pregnancy I was having a hard time finding work. No complaint, and I have never thought in any way was I discriminated against. So when filling out the application, I was always upfront about pregnancy. The interviews I did get, a few of them said that I got the interview because it showed how honest I was. So hard adjusting going from 2 incomes to 1. So the only job I could get was as a temporary at a postal distribution center. So I'm not antisocial, but I'm not really comfortable around strangers either. So I show up for my first day. My supervisor was not happy as human resources failed to notify him about my limited work conditions. So I would help sort packages until there was a buildup of damaged packages. Then I would try to piece them back together. So a truck from the area would bring in packages from Area A. We would then separate those packages into mail bags. The mail bags would be labeled all zip codes within a certain area in one bag. When said bag was full, it was put in a metal bin that would be put on a plane and delivered to a processing center like where I was. I didn't think so at the time, but my stupid part was taking the job and risking pumpkin to start with. So the mail bags are in a U shape, and there are 4 people that work within the U. There are multiple U-shaped work centers, one right next to the other. Same with metal bins, but they were directly across from the mail bags we were using. Now I was the only white person in that section. I go to the right or to the left and include my U. So having been in the military, I quickly clue in the ones around me who were Filipino. So I got down and started to work, engaging in small talk here and there, getting to know them. Day 3, one lady asked where I would go after X time. I tell them I'm pregnant and I'm limited duty. Then they go off on me because I'm not only sorting packages, I was throwing the full mail bags in the metal bins. I basically got told to do no more than sort the packages. So here is where Karen comes in. Karen looks well into menopause. She starts telling everybody she is pregnant and deserves the same treatment as me. I remind you, at no time did I ask for said limits, and even tried to calm them down over everything. Supervisor heard it all and said this will be dealt with. After this, Karen was not seen again. The other people, though, they were some of the best people to work with. One of the best jobs I had. Story 2. Today, I got a message from an old IT consultancy colleague of mine who runs his own small consultancy firm now. He was looking for someone who can hold his own winky face for one of his clients, which reminded me of this story. Background: about 10 years ago, freshly out of college, I started working for an IT consultancy firm. The first assignment I got was at a huge international company, which site in my country had about 100 people working for them. Half of them were consultants from my employer. The other half were internal employees. I joined a small development team, also half consultants and half internals. On site, there was a service manager from my employer, who oversaw all consultants when it came to evaluations, bonuses, news from our employer, etc. The consultants reported to a manager from the company for work-related stuff, but to the service manager from our employer for HR-related stuff. This story takes place in the beginning of January, and I just transitioned from consultant to internal employee after working with the client for a year and a half. Characters: me, Ross, the big boss, the manager from the company client. Karen, the service manager, conveniently named Karen. Greg, good guy Greg, my colleague, the one who messaged me today. Story: I was on a conference call with Ross, Greg, and some people from a different site. Me, Ross, and Greg were all sitting in a different location in the building. It was one of those meetings where you listen for an hour and only speak to say bye at the end. I had my noise-canceling headphones with microphone on, which had the company's logo on it. Ross gave it to me when I signed the contract with the company, as it was a leftover from the Christmas presents they all got. Suddenly, Karen yanks the headphones of my head and starts yelling. Karen, answer me instead of listening to music, you weasel. I just sat there with my mouth open in shock, as I hadn't seen or heard her approaching me. Karen, and who did you steal these headphones from? They are for internals only. Me, but they're mine. Due to the initial shock, I couldn't find the words to explain I got transitioned to internal when she was on her month-long holiday in December, and clearly, she didn't get the memo. Stop lying to me, jerk. Consider yourself fired. Me, finding my composure back. You can't fire me. I don't work for you. And even if I did, you have no right to talk to me like that. At this point, my phone beeped. I glanced at my screen, and I saw a message from Greg. You are not on mute. Ross and me can hear the whole thing. Karen, you are a lying jerk, and stop looking at your phone when I'm talking to you. Me, I don't work for you anymore, and if you keep talking to me like that, I will call security to have you removed. Who do you think? She was interrupted by her own phone ringing, which apparently was a call from Ross. She answers her phone with all the fake jolliness she could muster after her tirade against me, but after that all I heard her say was, "Oh, no, sir," and "Yes, sir." Maybe I have to note that Ross, my manager, was the most senior manager on our site, and therefore also the country manager, who signed the contract with my old employer, for which Karen worked. This was the only time in my life I saw someone age 20 years in a mere 15 seconds. Her face shifted from red to white as if someone flipped a light switch. She hung up and left without saying another word to me. Later, I found out people had complained about her behavior before, but now she was caught red-handed and my manager made sure her services were not needed anymore. She also got fired from my old employer, as the company was their biggest contract and they couldn't afford to lose it due to Karen's actions. In some way, I have to thank her though, as I haven't had any problems with shutting down someone who is being abusive since that event. Story 3. This happened in Germany, not too long ago. Keep in mind that there are mostly smaller retailers here, and not so much big box stores like in other parts of the world, which means that most small stores don't have dedicated store security. At least I've never seen them. I'm also 21, male, around 180 cm, about 5'11". I'm also generally a quiet and respectful man, but tend to have a short fuse about some pet peeves like strangers touching me or following me around, because I like to keep to myself. Also, I'm really enjoying non-physical confrontation if someone pushes for it. But I wouldn't start drama on my own. On to the story. The cast, the entitled Karen, and me, the guy who doesn't work at the grocery store. So I was shopping in a German food store to get some groceries, snacks, and the likes when I ran into an entitled Karen. I was wearing cargo shorts and a t-shirt, so I wasn't exactly looking like a store employee. Never mind that my cart was decently filled with various different items. I was minding my own business when I heard a surprisingly polite voice behind me. Karen, hey, young man. I turn around and see the future Karen, a bit shorter than me, middle-aged, not the special haircut, and a seemingly fake friendly smile. I don't know, just put me off for some reason, combined with her general nosy, arrogant attitude. Me, are you looking for something? Yes, go fetch item Y for me, please. At least she was friendly about it, but said it as if nothing was wrong with it. I personally never saw an employee at a store like this play fetch for a customer. Most they do is either show you where the item is and you have to get it yourself. Me, trying to smile at her. I'm sorry, I don't work here, but you can find item Y at location Z. I then turned around and went on about my day, but I guess we all know that's not the end of the story. After a few steps, Karen flipped a switch and decided to go crazy as I heard her stomping after me. Karen, what? Do your job, you worthless subhuman. She actually used the German Nazi term, which is a huge no-go in Germany, for obvious reasons. You're here to serve me, she growled and grabbed me by the shoulder. Remember, I had a short fuse about being touched, and I don't take too kindly on being berated by rude strangers either. And since Karen decided to push for unnecessary confrontation, I decided that she could get some. Turning around and smacking her hand away from my shoulder, I say, "First, do not touch me. Keep your hands to yourself." She decided to interrupt me and get visibly more irate. Shut. I'm not finished. Also, you can get right off with that Nazi terminology. And even if I worked here, you don't get to verbally abuse workers and treat them like slaves. Do your shopping yourself. I only got louder when she tried to interrupt me because I hate it, so she didn't exactly have a chance to interrupt me. How dare you touch me? Learn some respect. You should help out a single mother. Note, there was no kid around at that time, so I don't know why she said that. It's hard enough for me, so I deserve some nice things. Getting pregnant and then dumped by a guy doesn't exactly sound like an achievement to me, and certainly doesn't mean that I have to cater to your needs when I have other things to do. Karen gasped like a fish, mouth open and stammering. She was so red in the face, I thought she was about to explode physically. I'm still your elder. You should have respect and do as I say. Be grateful for your elders. You certainly look like a mummy, but that doesn't mean I have to treat you with respect. You obviously don't deserve it, and it's ridiculous that you think I owe you anything. Yeah, it kinda went from about me being a store employee to me having to cater to her needs for whatever reasons, although I don't work neither there nor as a personal butler. And that's right then when a manager turned the corner. I was surprised Karen didn't scream for one yet. Cue the manager asking what the problem is, and Karen explaining that I should be fired for being a worthless human being. She literally told the manager I should not only be fired, but should be put down, like if I was an animal with rabies or something like that. What the mess. As you most likely know, the manager told Karen that I did not work here, but somehow Karen still believed that I should be her personal slave/butler for whatever reason, and the manager and I shared a look. After every reasoning with Karen failed, I chimed in. If you don't leave me alone right now, I will call the police. I'm going to leave now. I turned and slowly left, where I could hear manager and Karen still arguing behind me, until manager threatened to call the police if she doesn't leave the store right now. He told her she's no longer welcome at his store, ever. I heard a loud crash and turned my head. Karen had flipped her shopping cart in her rage and power walked out of the store, while the manager called for some cleaning staff to help fix the mess. Story 4. 5 years ago, my son was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy. He was only 8 years old when the doctors told us he'd need a wheelchair for the rest of his life. It was devastating news for our family. But my son handled it better than any of us adults did. My kid is obsessed with superheroes. Always has been since he could walk. When we found out about the wheelchair, the first thing he asked wasn't about his condition or what it meant for his future. He asked if he could get a superhero wheelchair. I'll never forget the look on his face when he said it. Pure excitement mixed with hope. So that's exactly what we did. We worked with a custom wheelchair company and designed the most amazing superhero-themed wheelchair you've ever seen. It had Batman's logo on the back, Spider-Man's web pattern on the wheels, and Superman's colors throughout the frame. The armrests had little Captain America shields, and there were LED lights that could change colors. It cost us a fortune, but seeing my son's face light up every time he sat in it was priceless. The wheelchair became his identity in the best way possible. Other kids at school thought it was the coolest thing ever. He went from being the kid who couldn't walk to being the kid with the awesome superhero chair. It gave him confidence and made him feel special instead of different. Last Saturday, we decided to take a trip to the mall. My son had been asking to go to the comic book store there for weeks, and I figured it would be a nice family outing. We were walking through the main corridor when I noticed this woman staring at us. Well, specifically at my son's wheelchair. She had this kid with her, maybe 6 or 7 years old, who immediately started pointing at the wheelchair and getting excited. I didn't think much of it at first. Kids always react that way when they see my son's chair. Usually, the parents smile politely and we move on with our day. But this woman started walking toward us with purpose. I could tell something was off by the look on her face. She had that entitled expression that I've learned to recognize over the years. She approached me and asked where I got the wheelchair. I told her we had it custom made and explained that it was medical equipment. She then told me that her son loved superheroes and had been asking for something like this for months. I was confused by where this conversation was going. I suggested that there were lots of superhero toys at the toy store upstairs if she was interested. She shook her head and said I didn't understand. She explained that her son wanted to try the wheelchair just for a few minutes. I stared at her in disbelief. I told her that this wasn't a toy, but my son's mobility device that he needed to get around. That's when her entitled attitude really came out. She argued that my kid could walk for a few minutes because she'd seen kids in wheelchairs stand up before. She claimed her son had been good all day and deserved a turn. I felt my blood pressure rising. My son was sitting right there, listening to this woman talk about him like he wasn't even present. I told her that my son could not walk and that the wheelchair was not a toy. I made it clear that no one else was going to use it. She called me ridiculous and selfish, insisting it was just a wheelchair. Her kid started tugging on her shirt, whining about wanting to ride the cool chair. Instead of explaining to her child why that wasn't appropriate, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Before I could react, this woman reached down and grabbed my son under his arms. She literally lifted him out of his wheelchair and dropped him onto the floor of the mall. My 13-year-old son, who weighs maybe 90 pounds and has a muscle condition, was suddenly sitting on the cold tile floor, looking up at me in shock and confusion. She stood there and announced that now my son could sit there for a minute while hers tried the chair. I was frozen in horror for about 2 seconds. My son was on the ground. This woman's kid was climbing into his wheelchair, and she was standing there like she'd just solved some simple problem. But before I could even move or say anything, I heard a voice behind me. A mall security officer ordered the woman to step away from the child and put her hands where he could see them. I turned around to see the officer who had witnessed the entire thing. He'd been doing his rounds and saw this woman assault my son. She tried to explain that there had been a misunderstanding and that she was just letting her son try the wheelchair. The officer wasn't buying it. He told her that she had just physically removed a disabled child from his mobility device and thrown him on the ground. He ordered her to turn around and put her hands behind her back. She protested, calling the situation insane and claiming she didn't throw anyone. She insisted the kid was fine. The officer wasn't having any of it. He grabbed her arm and spun her around, then began reading her rights. She screamed that he couldn't arrest her because she was a mother and her son was right there. The officer explained that he had witnessed her assault a minor and that she was under arrest. He pushed her face down onto the ground right there in the middle of the mall and cuffed her. People were stopping to stare as she struggled and yelled about how unfair everything was. She ranted about police brutality and demanded to speak to his supervisor. She even had the nerve to complain that the wheelchair was too fancy and question why a kid needed something like that. The officer called for backup while she continued her meltdown on the floor. Her own son had climbed out of the wheelchair and was crying, asking why Mommy was being arrested. I quickly helped my son back into his chair and checked to make sure he wasn't hurt. He was shaken up but physically okay. The officer told me he would need me to stick around to give a statement. He also mentioned they would need to take photos of my son for evidence, just in case she tried to claim he wasn't actually disabled. I agreed to cooperate with whatever they needed. She was still yelling when they led her away in handcuffs. She blamed me for everything, insisting I should have just let her son have a turn. She threatened to sue all of us. Child Services ended up getting called for her kid, and her husband had to come pick him up from the mall. The officer told me later that she was charged with assault on a minor and could face serious jail time. My son handled it like a champ. On the way home, he told me the wheelchair worked exactly like it was supposed to. It helped him get around and made the bad guy get caught. 2 weeks later, we got a call from the prosecutor's office. The woman had tried to plea bargain, claiming she thought my son was faking his disability for attention. When they showed her the medical records and the officer's testimony, she finally accepted a plea deal that included anger management classes and community service at a children's hospital. She also had to pay for any therapy my son needed and cover the cost of having his wheelchair professionally cleaned and inspected for damage. To claim he wasn't actually disabled. I agreed to cooperate with whatever they needed. She was still yelling when they led her away in handcuffs. She blamed me for everything, insisting I should have just let her son have a turn. She threatened to sue all of us. Child Services ended up getting called for her kid, and her husband had to come pick him up from the mall. The officer told me later that she was charged with assault on a minor and could face serious jail time. My son handled it like a champ. On the way home, he told me the wheelchair worked exactly like it was supposed to. It helped him get around and made the bad guy get caught. 2 weeks later, we got a call from the prosecutor's office. The woman had tried to plea bargain, claiming she thought my son was faking his disability for attention. When they showed her the medical records and the officer's testimony, she finally accepted a plea deal that included anger management classes and community service at a children's hospital. She also had to pay for any therapy my son needed and cover the cost of having his wheelchair professionally cleaned and inspected for damage. Story 5. So this happened a few years ago, while I was still working at the airport. As a backstory, I didn't directly work for any airline. I worked for a ground handling company that managed the ground services for quite a few airlines at the airport where I worked. Only the main airline of our country has its own customer service staff, and they are easily recognized as they wear the same uniform as the staff in the cabin. The rest of us were often ambushed by passengers of airlines we knew nothing about, but we were used to it, and kindly directed them to the right people, or sometimes were even able to answer them, for example if they asked for the gate or where the check-in counters are. So anyways, it's the afternoon rush during summer holidays, and we are about halfway done with check-in for Airline X. The flight is full, and it's one of those airlines that flies everywhere, so the passengers are also from everywhere with various amounts of luggage and several different types of travel documents. Check-in is usually slow and agonizing. Then, and all of a sudden, I am dealing with a lady that has apparently missed her flight. I sit at the counter at the far end, as I have also been assigned to go to the gate after check-in has calmed down a bit. I see this lady coming from the corner of my eye, but at first, I assume she is just coming to use the scale meant for passengers. I call the next family to my desk, keeping an eye on the clock and the estimated time of arrival of the aircraft. Just as I greet the family and take their passports, this lady stomps to my desk and says, "Excuse me?" I give her a quick smile and say, "I'm sorry, the end of the line is that way," as I now think she's one of our passengers. No, I'm flying to City X with Airline Y. Okay? I need you to check me in. My flight is leaving in 30 minutes. Oh, I'm so sorry, but I don't work for that airline. All this while still trying to provide service to the family in front of me. Thankfully, they seem understanding. Well, call the people who do. Where is their staff? They can't just leave their desks empty. If your flight leaves in 30 minutes, that means the check-in is probably closed. They have a ticket desk downstairs. It might still be open. I knew the airline closes 45 minutes before departure. This wasn't the first time we had to tell Airline Y's passengers about this, but usually they accepted their fate after hearing we don't work for them. Wah! But I have to get on that flight. Call someone. Call someone right now. I am so sorry, ma'am, but my priority is this queue right here, and I don't work for the company that handles your airline. I honestly would not even know who to call. And also, I know it wouldn't help, so there is no way I will stop checking in my passengers by calling the supervisor of a different company about a late passenger. You take my bag then? She screams and literally just dumps her bag on my belt that is moving because I just sent the family's 2 bags forward. I manage to grab it before it disappears without a tag, and it's so heavy I nearly tip over in my heels as I drag it back to the scale. Ma'am, I can't send your bag forward without a tag. Tag it then. I can't, as I have said. I don't work for Airline Y. I have no access to their system, nor do I know if they even take last-minute bags. It's the same belt. Their check-in is right there. You all use the same computers. Just take my bag, or I want to talk to your manager. At this point, she is loud enough that my colleague at the next desk is calling security, and she attracts the attention of my check-in supervisor. I send the family at my desk on their merry way. They thank me and wish me good luck. But I can't call in the next customer, as this lady is now in front of my desk, pointing at me and accusing me of bad service and screaming how she has to be on the flight and how I was just stuck up and high on power. I opened the app on our computers that allowed us to see the boarding status of all flights. Basically the same screen passengers see on the monitors, but with timestamps, and quietly interrupted her screaming by saying, "They have had final call on the board for 10 minutes. I don't think you'd even make it." The line to the security is at least 15 minutes, and even if she managed to elbow her way through it, the gate is at the other end of the airport, and she'd have to clear passport control as well. "You know that, but you can't check me in," she then screams. My supervisor is now actually on the phone with the company that handles Airline Y and tells the lady once she is hung up that they close 45 minutes before departure, and now we have to listen to the lady absolutely lose her sense about how no one told her, and she will sue all of us. By now, the aircraft status has changed to approaching, which means that since the check-in is, by some miracle, winding down, I'm supposed to close my desk and go help the rest of the gate staff prep for deboarding and boarding. I look at my supervisor, who promptly tells the colleague who called security to close up and go in my stead, as the lady is not done. When she sees security arriving, she blows up to an actual tantrum like a 5-year-old, stomping her foot and slapping my desk, even kicking her luggage as if trying to force it to the back belt. We let the security kick her out, but she is still yelling at me and my supervisor how Airline X and Y both suck, and how we should be ashamed of ourselves for not helping her and how she works in tourism and knows how all of this works, and of course, she also knew the CEO of our company, and we'd be fired within a week. I couldn't resist calling out, "Our CEO doesn't work for Airline Y either," which caused my supervisor to go hush, but she was barely not laughing, and I didn't receive any reprimands. I checked in a couple of more passengers before I hurried to the gate where deboarding had just finished. I also see Airline Y pushing back from its gate, right on schedule. Story 6. For context, when I was a young mother of 2, I worked as a waiter and was barely making it. There were times when money was so tight that I would feel panicky whenever my kids' friends came over after school and wanted an apple because I had bought just enough for my own kids' lunches that week. All of our clothes came from thrift stores and garage sales, strictly out of necessity. Fast forward to now, when things are so much better. But old habits die hard, and I still love to thrift and garage sale. Not because I need to anymore, but because I know the amazing treasures that can be found there, and I love the thrill of the hunt. One day I was in line at our local thrift store, and a woman in her 30s was holding a beautiful blue silk slip dress from Madewell. She was pleading with the women behind the counter, saying she hadn't realized when she bought it the previous week that it had a tear, and she wanted her money back. There are "no returns, no refunds" signs everywhere in this store, and the women behind the counter pointed to them and explained they couldn't give her a refund. The woman insisted, "Please, please, please, I paid $15 for this dress that I need for a wedding this month. It's damaged, and I can't wear it." Everyone in line was watching, and some people were getting impatient, but I was immediately flooded with empathy. $15 may not sound like much money, just like an apple for an 8-year-old guest doesn't seem like much food. But it brought me right back to what it felt like walking that financial tightrope. I happened to be a pretty good and inventive seamstress, so I stepped up and said, "Hey, could you show me the tier?" The woman spun around and held it up for me. It was a small, horizontal slit on the side, just below the waist at about hip level. I said, "I can fix that for you, for free. I'd love the challenge. It'll take me a few days. Will that work?" She kind of awkwardly handed me the dress. We exchanged information, and the women behind the counter looked incredibly relieved. I patched the tier with some blue silk velvet. I cut it into a small flower shape and sewed a tiny rhinestone vintage button in the center. It looked absolutely intentional and, in my humble opinion, even better than before. I was so excited to have done this good deed and to have rescued a pretty dress, which is also a passion of mine. I texted the woman, let's call her Jane, and sent her pictures of the dress. She wrote back and said she loved it and would come pick it up that afternoon. I told her I'd be out, but would put it on the porch in a bag for her. When I came home that evening, the bag was still there. I texted Jane the next morning and asked her if she'd like me to leave it out again. She said yes, and that she would be by that day. This went on for another few days. Eventually, I stopped texting, and the bag with the dress just sat there. After a week, I decided to bring it back into the house and just wait to see what would happen next. About 10 days later, Jane texted me and told me she was sorry she hadn't come by. She explained that she was a very busy mother of young kids and also taught yoga classes, and she just didn't have time to come and get it. She then told me where she lived about 10 minutes from my house, which, by the way, is between her home and the center of town where the only grocery store in the area is, and asked if I would bring it to her instead. There aren't many great things about getting older, but one of them, for me at least, is knowing what to do and what not to do in most situations, based on collective life experience. Another is a better understanding of my own motives. I had seen a desperate young woman who was panicking about the $15 she had spent on a dress she couldn't wear. I saw myself in her shoes, remembered my own desperation, and thought, I can be a hero. With a little kindness, I can write a tiny piece of the universe for her with a small gesture, and she'll be so grateful. So maybe it wasn't entirely selfless. Maybe I wanted the endorphin rush of helping someone, or maybe I just wanted to be the kind maternal figure who came to the rescue, the figure I didn't have when I was her age. But when she asked me to drive the dress, I had already spent an hour or so repairing for her for free to her house because she was too busy to come get it herself. I had an immediate reset. I said, "No, sorry, I won't be able to do that. But just text me the next time you know you'll be in my neighborhood, and I'll set it out for you." I'll also add that there was a notable lack of appreciation on her part through the whole process. I don't think she ever said thank you once. Another month went by with nothing from Jane, so presumably the wedding she had bought it for had come and gone. One day, when one of my daughters-in-law, who also loves to thrift, was visiting, I told her the story and showed her the dress. She said she loved it and asked if she could try it on. It fit her perfectly. She told me to let her know if Jane never came for it, because she would love to have it. I told her to just take it with her, since it was clear Jane was not coming back for it. I will admit that while repairing it, I had noticed the dress had definitely been worn before there was even a small stain on the bodice. I treated it, washed it, and it came out, but I eventually realized Jane had bought the dress, worn it, torn it herself, and was trying to trick the thrift store by saying it was damaged when she purchased it. Believe it or not, almost 3 months later, Jane called me one day and said, "I'll be in your neighborhood this afternoon. Could you put the dress out for me?" No apologies, no explanations. It gave me no small satisfaction to tell her that I was so sorry, but because I hadn't heard from her for so long, I thought she didn't want it anymore and had given the dress away. She just said, "Okay," and hung up. For what it's worth, I love unusual stories, and the strangeness of this one made the whole experience worthwhile. Also, this isn't a cautionary tale about reasons you shouldn't help people. One entitled Jane won't stop me from offering to help those who genuinely need it whenever I can.